The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
All right, Semafor, the news publication, has reported Binance may face Department of Justice fraud charges. However, prosecutors are considering alternatives given the risk of an FTX-style bank run. And joining us to discuss that is Jones Day partner and former director of the CFTC's, I want to say this right, Market Participants Division, Josh Sterling. Welcome, Josh.
Hello, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Oh, it's great to have you with us. I couldn't have thought of the entire team actually couldn't have thought of a better person to have on this day, given your previous role. And we were just thinking what you make of this. What do you think of officials, thinking about the impact on customers if they actually go ahead and take severe action against Binance?
Absolutely. Well, that is a totally appropriate and normal action that the Department of Justice would take when evaluating whether to bring criminal charges against a corporation. In other contexts, they look at the harm to shareholders. I think by analogy here, you'd say, what are the harm to people that are using the Binance platforms to trade? And I think it is of significant note that, I checked this morning, Binance is 7 times the size of Coinbase in daily volume. It is by far the largest exchange in the world by any measure. And it is well known that U.S. individuals do use that platform and not just Binance US. So they do have to consider these things in assessing whether to criminally charge a company, because that is usually what we call the death blow. And that's not a legal term. That's just well understood that criminal charges are often fatal to a company and has severe consequences for all stakeholders.
Can I just follow up real quickly on that? Because it's interesting that you say that's a death blow, because, it seems that some of these companies, these more global companies that are being sued by the SEC or the CFTC, they're kind of blasé about it because they're like, oh, we have a global business. We had Justin Sun from Tron on the show, and he didn't really seem that concerned about what was going on with the SEC. So why is the DOJ a death blow when the SEC is not?
Right. Well, fair point. I think the significance can be distilled into one concept. I'm a simple guy. DOJ can put you in jail. SEC, CFTC can't. But
if they're outside of the United States, and if the majority of their business is outside of the United States, and they're in a place that they can't be extradited to the United States, does it actually matter?
I think it does matter. And in that regard, I would refer you to other recent actions involving large non-US cryptocurrency platforms or trading companies where there were significant issues. I think also it is sometimes quite often for the United States to assert jurisdiction over non-US companies. All you got to do is use the means or instrumentalities of interstate commerce, and that can extend fairly far. There are live arguments about that in the CFTC and SEC cases against Binance right now. And you're certainly right that in one sense you could say, well, a lot of Binance's business, its operations, its customers are offshore, so no big deal if they're sanctioned here in the United States and are prohibited from doing business here. It can also be, though, if you're criminally charged and indeed convicted, if it were to go to trial as a company, people might just not want to do business with you anywhere. And so you can certainly settle with the SEC or the CFTC, or even if you lose in court, you're paying a specific amount of money. You may be subject to some limitations on your business. But it is certainly much more severe to face the possibility of an actual criminal conviction. Go ahead. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to pick on this a little bit more. The article that we have referenced is a publication called Semafor. They are the ones who've broken this as a scoop, and they say that that they are considering fraud charges, right, but they're worried about a bank run. Right now, fraud charges don't necessarily lead to let's say a bank run. We've had those fraud charges. They are not saying that they are thinking of arresting an individual or several individuals, or that they will seize any websites. That's not what we know right now. So unless they say that, there is a worry for a bank run. But considering fraud charges, there shouldn't be a worry for a bank run. Is that clear enough?
I understand, and I'm familiar with the Semafor article. I'm not sure that I would be so quick to dismiss the likelihood of people pulling out of the business right away. And I think bank run in this context would mean, complete loss of liquidity in many main tokens, or the tie up of customer funds. That's the concern. And if you're a prosecutor, just like you're a civil enforcer, you could look at other contexts. I mean, most notably FTX, most notably Terra Luna, where there were other issues going on, of course, and say, look, the consequences are severe and not entirely predictable, because this is definitely an emerging technology, and the tentacles of Binance and where to go are not fully known. So that could be a substantial issue. Then you might also consider the second order effects. I mean, if you are a major source of liquidity for a given token, and there's 300 some tokens, I think, at least, I'm probably understating that, traded on Binance, and all of a sudden that venue dries up because people are trying to get off of Binance, that could severely affect the token as it's traded on other platforms, if I understand things correctly. So, yeah, yes.
I'm scratching my head at this because on the one hand, it sounds like you're saying the DOJ is, I don't want to say cowardly, but they're kind of hesitant to put a stop to something that they think may be a fraud. At the same time, they're like, well, we could prosecute a guy who runs one of the largest political parties and has had half the votes in the United States. And the consequences on that's not a big deal. But the consequences apparently of trying Binance is such a problem. They have to sit there and worry like, oh my God, what if this happens? What if like 5 banks in Minnesota fall apart? It doesn't make sense. It just on the surface, if they're committing fraud, and if the DOJ thinks they're committing fraud, who cares? So what? It implodes. You know what? The justice supposed to be more important than the consequences about a bunch of kids in their basement trading, a bunch of degens trading coins all day when they shouldn't be trading on Binance to begin with. I don't get this part.
Sure, that's fair. I completely understand that, and that's definitely a timely perspective you've offered compared to other prosecutions that are going on not 3 blocks from my office. So I think what I would say is that there is a policy of the Department of Justice. They've used it, they still use it, that says you've got to consider the collateral consequences of your actions. I mean, going back decades, leaders of the Department of Justice have said, the power of the prosecutor is, really substantial. It is life-altering, and it has to be used judiciously. So they may well fully decide, let's go ahead and charge CZ or any individuals or even the corporate entity with fraud. Let's charge them criminally. They may not, and they may try to seek a different resolution, a non-prosecution agreement or a deferred prosecution agreement. I can't.
What do you think they'll do? What do you think they'll do? We got to ask you that.
Well, that's fair. Well, if I were in the prediction game, I'd be in a different line of business. But what I think is, if I were sitting there in government again, I might want to see where the SEC and the the SEC and the CFTC cases go against Binance, and then make a determination on that. There are motions to dismiss right now the civil charges. They've put to the court, what the extraterritorial reach of U.S. law is, at least in the civil context. I do think that is a live issue. They might just let that run and let the SEC and the CFTC lead the charge. Then again, they might say, look, we're so convinced with the evidence we have that we need to charge because there are other issues, which I'll mention, that necessitate charging and collateral consequences considered but set aside. We're going to charge it. You can charge and prosecute. You could charge and proceed and try to get to a deferred prosecution agreement or non-prosecution agreement, so that you're not getting a conviction. But I think that one thing that the procedures say at the Department of Justice is you have to consider other law enforcement priorities. And look, there could be national security or tax priorities that might say we do need to proceed here. I mean, I think they would be considering that. Yeah.
So assuming Hunter Biden isn't on the board of Binance that we don't know about, and they go through and they decide to prosecute and what have you. Okay, well, who goes to jail? Like,
Sure.
ultimately, does anyone actually go to jail?
Well, if they charge individuals and they're able to assert personal jurisdiction over them and get them into court and try, certainly those individuals could go to jail. There's obviously plenty of precedent for people involved in corporate wrongdoing serving hard prison time. I began my career when Enron was falling apart. Some people there spent some real time in jail. So I guess
Americans.
So what? Well, sure, but if you were an Austrian official at Enron, I'll pick on Enron because it doesn't exist anymore, and you participated in video calls or you sent wires into the United States, you're fair game. There is the U.S. jurisdiction over wrongdoing, particularly fraud, where the national interest is considered, is pretty substantial. And so they would have a basis for doing it. Now, you could well imagine scenarios in which certain potential persons of interest in the case who wind up being charged take measures to avoid U.S. jurisdiction. That can certainly happen. I know in the Terra Luna case, Do Kwon had attempted to do that and was not successful. So I think the so what is for an individual, yes, service could be made on you. You could be extradited to the U.S. You could face charges and go to jail. For a company, it'll just end the company. If you're criminally convicted, no one's going to want to do business with you. Probably even criminally charged.
Yeah. No, we should note right now that Binance declined to comment, and the Justice Department also didn't immediately respond to CoinDesk's request for comment. Thank you so much, Josh.
Sure.
That was Jones Day partner and former CFTC Division Director, Josh Sterling. Thank you very much.